There's a popular supplement that's been getting a lot of hype on social media lately for heart health. But the danger is you're not really getting accurate information on it. This supplement is based on a controversial food called natto. It's made from fermented soybeans, and it's very popular in some Asian countries like Japan. Some consider natto to be a delicacy. Others think it's just plain gross. I've tried it. It's pretty funky. It's hard to get through at first. It's definitely an acquired taste. But the history of natto is fascinating because in the 1980s, scientists discovered that extracts made from natto could dissolve blood clots in the lab. So they set out to isolate the molecule, the active principle in natto that has this property, and they isolated this enzyme that they called nattokinase. So this now has become this supplement that's pretty popular. So let's quickly go over the upsides and downsides of taking nattokinase as a supplement so you can make your own informed decision. Full disclosure, I have no conflicts of interest. I don't sell any pills, prescription or not. Personally, I don't take nattokinase. I think it's been excessively hyped on social media, but other views are possible. And in the end of the video, we'll touch on what is known about health effects of eating natto itself. Is it good for your heart or not? Are there any downsides? So nattokinase has this anticoagulation effect or this blood clot busting effect, and clotting plays a role in a lot of heart attacks. Thrombosis is part of the process that leads to an acute heart attack. So this theory was born that maybe if we take a nattokinase supplement, it can help with heart health. But do the results actually support that? Does the science back that up? In lab animals, nattokinase has fascinating results. It dissolves blood clots as well, but it also lowers cholesterol, blood pressure, and it also seems to reduce the plaque in the artery wall. So really encouraging results in model organisms like mice or rats. But a lot of things that work in mice don't translate to humans, don't pan out. So what happens in actual humans given nattokinase? In humans, we look at this in basically 3 levels. And by the way, this is translatable to any other supplement. So the rationale here, the thinking process is something you can use when you're considering any other supplement out there. First level is blood work. So just physiological markers that kind of allow us to guesstimate what the health effect might be. And the strongest one is probably the effect of nattokinase on blood pressure. We see a reduction of blood pressure of roughly 5 points, 5 millimeters mercury of systolic blood pressure. Now, one issue is that different randomized trials testing nattokinase in human beings use different doses of the supplement. So this is one issue we have in this field. So nattokinase concentration is measured in FUs or fibrinolytic units. They're basically a measure of the potency of nattokinase as a blood clot busting agent. And most trials use 2,000 FUs. And at that dose, it's a bit of a coin toss. Some trials show this modest reduction of blood pressure, sometimes around 3, 4, 5 points. Others showed no significant effect. Then there's another trial that used a higher dose, 3,600 FUs, and they see a stronger effect, 7 points reduction in systolic blood pressure. So it's possible that there's a dose-dependent effect here. As the dose goes up, the effect becomes stronger, although we only have one of these trials with a higher dose, so a little bit of caution there. But it looks like it probably has this moderate blood pressure lowering effect. When we look at other aspects of blood work like cholesterol, triglycerides, there it's even dirtier. The confidence is even lower. Those trials using 2,000 FUs generally find no effect. Then the one trial at 3,600 does find a significant reduction of cholesterol level, triglycerides, and LDL cholesterol. However, we have some other trials with even higher doses with 6,000, 7,000, 8,000. And there, again, it's a bit inconsistent. Some occasionally show an effect, others don't. So it's unclear. If it works for lipids, it doesn't seem to be very consistent. Glucose levels, blood sugar levels, same thing. The trials at 2,000 show no effect. The trial at 3,600 does show a reduction of glucose. So it's possible, but not nailed to the wall. And finally, the effect of nattokinase on coagulation, that we do see consistently. Different markers, different metrics of coagulation speed are usually slowed down. So this could be good or bad. It depends on the context. So it could help prevent thrombotic events, as we said, coagulation-based events. On the other hand, if someone has a propensity for bleeding, hemorrhagic strokes are a type of stroke that involves your blood vessel bleeding into the surrounding areas, that could be worsened by an agent that slows down coagulation. So it's context dependent and depends on the individual and the propensity, whether this is a good thing or a bad thing to inhibit coagulation. Okay, all of that is level 1. Remember, we said there are 3 levels to the evidence, right? Increasing order of importance and weight. This first level is Bloodwork, so metrics that allow us to make an educated guess as to the health effect of the supplement. The next level are changes in actual plaque in the artery wall. And here we have a study that's being hyped aggressively on social media as supposedly proving that nattokinase is this amazing supplement. So this is a study out of China where they looked at over 1,000 participants and they report very substantial reductions, not just in plaque size, but in most of those metrics, cholesterol, triglycerides, and they see those results on participants that are on very high doses of nattokinase, over 10,000 FUs, whereas those on a lower dose of around 3,000, 3,600, they don't see any of those benefits. These are really interesting findings. However, this study has enormous limitations. Number one, it's a one-off. These findings have never been reproduced. Number two, it's not a trial. There's no randomization, and there's no placebo group. This study is what we call a retrospective cohort. That sounds like a big word, but it's really not. Retrospective just means looking backwards. So unlike a trial where you start with people, you give them the supplement and you follow them over time and you see what happens. Here, they're starting out with people who say they're taking nattokinase and they're looking back in time and trying to find some relationships there. And the problem with that is that design creates a lot of biases. So it's prone to a lot of error. So these studies are a lot cheaper, a lot easier to run, but they're what we call hypothesis generating. We basically look at this type of study to have ideas of things that we then test in trials. It's not really the type of evidence that you want to base an important health decision on. And you can look this up. You can look up Google retrospective study or retrospective cohort, and you'll see the types of biases and the types of limitations that they have. So you want to be a little cautious when you hear someone on social media say, hey, there's a study and it shows these amazing results. Okay, but what kind of study? That matters enormously because studies aren't all created equal, and what we call experimental design. How is the study conducted? What do they actually do? This makes them night and day. To make this whole story more colorful, there is an actual randomized trial with a placebo group looking at nattokinase that was conducted at USC in California, and it was basically a dud. They saw no changes to plaque or artery wall properties, and these metrics like blood pressure, cholesterol, all these things, nothing changed. However, they used a much lower dose. They used 2,000 FUs. So yeah, this trial is saying that dose is probably not worth taking, but it doesn't rule out that at a higher dose, maybe it works. Maybe it does all kinds of things. I found a small trial out of China also, I believe, that nobody talks about, but it's actually much more interesting, stronger evidence than the retrospective study that everybody's hyping. And in this one, they gave 6,000 FUs of nattokinase to one group, and the other group was actually on a type of statin called simvastatin. And both groups saw a reduction in plaque size, and the group on the nattokinase actually seemed to be a stronger reduction of plaque size. Now, it's a small trial. It's a pilot trial. I think they had about 30-something participants per group, so it needs to be repeated. Also, they didn't have a proper control group. There was no placebo or anything like that for us to compare. But definitely really interesting result, and I think it's absolutely worth running a proper trial with adequate size, with a placebo control, looking at nattokinase with a higher dose, right? 6,000 to 10,000, that range would be really cool to see whether it works or not. Okay, all of that is second level. Now we have the third level of evidence, which is actual things that we can feel. We call that hard outcomes. So heart attacks, strokes, deaths, At the end of the day, these are the things we actually care about, because changes to plaque morphology or blood work only matter to the extent that they reflect your likelihood of having a heart attack or angina or a stroke, something that you can feel and that affects your quality of life. So heart outcomes are really the test of any pill, prescription or not. Does it actually work? And here we have none. There's no outcome trials for nattokinase yet. There's a very small study out of China looking at some patients post-stroke given nattokinase, and they report that they seem to be improving well, recovering well post-stroke, but there doesn't seem to be a control group. It's really just a pilot, kind of taking a first look, but a proper trial looking at heart outcomes is non-existent. So to summarize everything we know about nattokinase, it probably helps lower blood pressure by 5 to 7 points systolic. It seems to have this anticoagulation effect or blood clot busting effect. It seems to help reduce the size of the plaque in the artery wall, although that hasn't been properly demonstrated. And then as far as heart attacks, strokes, we just don't know. For me, the evidence on nattokinase seems really promising, really encouraging. I would love to see more trials on it, properly powered and looking at these interesting outcomes and with the concentrations that matter. Until those are there, I'm personally not going to take it, and I haven't recommended it to family members who have plaque. Okay, here's a valid question. Why not just take the pill on the off chance that it works, right? Do we have to wait till the evidence is perfect? This is a valid question. My rationale is when we don't have outcome data, it could go in any direction. The outcome data could be positive, it could be neutral, or it could be negative. It could make things worse. And we see that sometimes with drugs that have promising data in the preclinical stage. Then when you run that large trial that's supposed to really nail it, sometimes the net effect is harm. For example, because a lot of these drugs have off-target effects. So they can do things other than these effects that we know, and you sometimes only see that in a proper trial with a placebo group. One thing to point out is that from the studies that we have, we don't see a lot of side effects of nattokinase, at least to the size and to the duration of the trials that have been conducted. So far, it seems pretty benign. I've seen 1 or 2 case reports of people who had bleeding events who were taking nattokinase, but these are basically anecdotes. These are things that someone reported and published, but they're isolated cases. I wouldn't even say that we know that in those individuals it was caused by the nattokinase, because to draw that type of cause and effect conclusions, you need other types of data. So those are maybe some signs of concern. I would definitely be cautious taking nattokinase if you have a propensity for bleeding, if you're on blood thinners, for example, if you're about to go into surgery or something like that. Be cautious, talk to your doctor before you take nattokinase. What about taking it to lower blood pressure? That might actually be the strongest argument as far as nattokinase. For me, the same rationale. We have a lot of other things with more evidence and with a bigger effect on blood pressure. So for me, it doesn't seem worth it, including a lot of dietary tips and specific exercises that lower blood pressure more than nattokinase does. We have a lot of videos on that, and I'll link those in the end. So for me, not worth taking it, but it's an argument that could be made. Full disclosure, for heart health, I take a form of statin called pitavastatin that is not as common in the West. And I also take something called ezetimibe, and we have videos explaining the whole rationale, why and why not. And I have some family members who take rosuvastatin. And we also have all videos covering all the common questions, the side effects, and all those things. So I'll link that in the description. Of course, your choice might be different. You may think the available evidence is enough to convince you. That's your call. But the point is, now you have the information so you can make an informed decision. Now, let's talk about natto itself, eating the fermented beans, the food. What do we know about that scientifically? What are the health effects? So one interesting finding is that in multiple studies, people who eat more natto have a lower risk of dying of heart disease and cardiovascular disease. And this is after adjusting for obvious confounders, obvious variables like smoking and exercise and things like that. The effect still survives. Nutritionally, natto is a source not just of nattokinase, but also vitamin K2, isoflavones, protein, and fiber. And it's a fermented food and also a probiotic. One caveat is if you're on blood thinners, something called warfarin, talk to your doctor before you start eating natto. It could interfere. Now, if they can only come up with a natto that doesn't taste like the inside of your gym bag, that would be great. For the best workout to reverse heart disease, to shrink plaque in the artery walls, check out this previous video, and I'll see you in there.